Tae-1 stood at the observation window of Gateway 7, watching Earth spin slowly below. The orbital platform had been his home for 3 years now, ever since the United Earth Council assigned him as a diplomatic liaison to the Galactic Coalition. At 32, he was young for such an important position, but his talent for understanding alien cultures had earned him the post. He checked his watch. The Valasian trade delegation would arrive in 20 minutes. This was the 5th meeting this month, and Tae-1 had studied everything available about their species. The Valasians came from a moon covered in vast oceans, and their biology reflected that aquatic heritage. What the reports didn't prepare him for was meeting Hannah. She walked into the conference room like moonlight made solid. Her skin had a gentle luminescence that reminded Tae-1 of pearls, and her hair flowed down her back in silver waves that seemed to move on their own. When she smiled at him, her eyes sparkled like looking into deep space itself. But what surprised him most was when she spoke. "Good morning, Tae-1. I hope your day is starting well," she said in perfect Korean, her voice like water flowing over smooth stones. Tae-1 blinked. Most aliens use translation devices. "You speak Korean?" "I've been studying human languages for 2 years. Korean seemed beautiful to me, so I learned it first." Her skin flickered with warm golden tones. "I hope I'm pronouncing everything correctly." That first meeting lasted 6 hours instead of the scheduled 2. They talked about trade agreements, yes, but also about poetry, food, the feeling of rain, and what it meant to be far from home. When Hannah's delegation finally had to leave, Tae-1 found himself already looking forward to the next meeting. The next meeting came 3 days later. Then another. Then another. The trade negotiations became a pleasant excuse for what was really happening between them. Tae-1 learned that Hannah's skin changed colors with her emotions: gold for happiness, soft blue for calm, pink for excitement. She learned that Tae-1 liked his coffee with too much sugar, and that he missed the smell of pine trees from his childhood. "Home in the mountains. On my world, we have forests too," Hannah told him one evening as they shared a meal in the station's garden dome. "But they grow underwater. The trees are tall and purple, and fish swim between the branches like birds." "I'd love to see that someday," Tae-1 said. Hannah's skin rippled with that warm gold again. "Maybe you will." 6 months passed like a dream. Tae-1 found himself thinking about Hannah constantly when they were apart. The way she laughed at his jokes, even the bad ones. How she listened when he talked about his work stress. The time she cried watching an old Korean drama with him, completely absorbed in the human emotions on screen. His colleagues noticed. "You're in love with her," his friend Dong-min said matter-of-factly one day. Tae-1 couldn't deny it. "Is that wrong?" "She's not human. Does that matter?" Dong-min shrugged. "Love is love, my friend. The question is, does she feel the same way?" Tae-1 decided to find out. He invited Hannah to the observation deck one evening when Earth was passing through daylight below them. He had rehearsed a speech, something diplomatic and careful. But when she arrived, her skin glowing soft blue in the starlight, all his prepared words disappeared. "Hannah, I love you," he said simply. "I know we're different species. I know there are complications. But I want to be with you, if you'll have me." For a moment, Hannah's skin went completely white, and Tae-1's heart sank. Had he made a terrible mistake? But then color rushed back, cycling through gold and pink in colors he'd never seen before. She was crying and laughing at the same time. "I was so afraid you wouldn't feel the same way," she whispered. Yes, Tae-1? I love you too." They kissed under the stars, and Tae-1 felt like the luckiest man in the galaxy. 3 months later, Tae-1 proposed properly. He bought a ring, a simple silver band, because he'd learned that Valasians valued simplicity in precious things. He took her back to that same observation deck, "Hannah, will you marry me?" She said yes before he even finished the question. But then her expression grew serious, and her skin turned a deep, thoughtful purple. "Tae-won, there's something I must tell you. My people have a tradition. On the wedding night, there is a ritual that must be performed. It's sacred to us, passed down for thousands of years." "What kind of ritual?" Tae-won asked. Hana's skin flickered with that anxious blue again. "I cannot explain it to you beforehand. That's part of the tradition. The ritual must be experienced, not described. But I need to know, do you trust me enough to accept this? It won't harm you, I promise. But it will be ... intense." Tae-won felt a small chill run down his spine. The reasonable part of his mind said to ask more questions, to understand what he was agreeing to. But he looked at Hana's face, at the genuine worry in her eyes, and he realized something. Love meant trust. If he couldn't trust her with this, he couldn't truly say he loved her. "I trust you," he said. "Whatever this ritual is, I'll do it." Relief washed over Hana's features, her skin blooming into warm gold. "Thank you. Thank you for trusting me." The wedding was approved by both the United Earth Council and the Valasian High Assembly. It would be the first official marriage between a human and a Valasian, a symbol of growing cooperation between their peoples. The ceremony was planned for Gateway 7, broadcast across both worlds. The day arrived faster than Tae-won expected. He stood in his ceremonial hanbok, traditional Korean wedding attire, while Hana wore a flowing gown that seemed to be made of water and light. The ceremony blended both cultures' Korean vows and Valasian songs, human vows and alien blessings. Thousands watched across the galaxy as they were declared married. Tae-won should have felt only joy. And he did feel joy, overwhelming and pure. But he also noticed something else. Throughout the ceremony, Hana's skin kept flickering between that happy gold and a deep, dark blue he'd never seen on her before. It wasn't the calm blue he knew. This was something else. Something that looked almost like anxiety or fear when they finally retired to their wedding suite. A beautiful room with windows showing Earth and stars. Tae-won tried to push away the small knot of nervousness in his stomach. Hana stood by the window, looking out at space. "Are you ready?" she asked quietly, not turning around. "Ready for what?" Tae-won tried to keep his voice light. Hana finally turned to face him. Her skin was that deep, dark blue now, pulsing slowly. "The ritual. We must begin it now, while the wedding day is still fresh." She reached into a small case she'd brought with her and pulled out something Tae-won had never seen before. It looked like a crystal, but it seemed alive somehow, pulsing with internal light that matched the rhythm of Hana's skin. "Sit with me," Hana said, her voice taking on a formal, ceremonial tone he'd never heard from her before. "And please, Tae-won, no matter what happens, remember that I love you." That knot of nervousness in his stomach twisted tighter. "Hana, you're scaring me a little." "I know," she whispered, and tears began running down her face even as she smiled. "I'm scared too, but this must be done." Tae-won sat down across from her, and Hana placed the crystal device between them. As she began to speak in her native language, words that sounded like the ocean itself, the crystal began to glow brighter and brighter. Tae-won felt something he couldn't explain, like invisible threads reaching out from the device toward his mind. Whatever was about to happen, there was no turning back now. The crystal pulsed faster now, and strange symbols began appearing in the air around them. They weren't holograms exactly, they seemed more real than that, like someone had written on the fabric of space itself. Tae-won tried to read them, but they shifted and changed before his eyes could focus. Hana continued speaking in her language, her voice taking on harmonics that shouldn't have been possible from a single throat. The words resonated in Tae-won's chest, making his heartbeat synchronize with the rhythm of the crystal. He wanted to ask her to stop, to explain what was happening. But his voice wouldn't work. "Give me your hands," Hannah said, switching back to Korean, but maintaining that strange, layered quality to her voice. Tae-won reached out, and the moment their fingers touched, the world exploded. He was still sitting in the wedding suite, but he was also somewhere else. Everywhere else. He saw oceans that stretched across entire moons, cities built from coral and light deep underwater where sunlight never reached. He saw Velasian children learning to swim before they could walk, saw families gathering for celebrations under purple forests that swayed in gentle currents. But then the visions darkened. He saw war, ships falling from the sky in flames, cities crumbling, Hana's people screaming in terror as something vast and incomprehensible descended upon their worlds. Not just their homeworld, but dozens of colonies, hundreds of stations. An empire of water and light being systematically destroyed. What is this? Tae-won managed to gasp. His head felt like it was being split open, filled with memories that weren't his own. The truth. Hannah's voice echoed from everywhere and nowhere. The ritual is called the binding of souls. It's how my people share memories, knowledge, truth. When Velasians marry, we hide nothing from each other. Every memory, every secret, every truth becomes shared. Tae-won felt Hana in his mind now, not as an invader, but as a presence. He could feel her emotions, her love for him, yes, but also her fear, her guilt, her desperate hope. And underneath it all, a crushing weight of responsibility. "I don't understand," Tae-won said, though he wasn't sure if he was speaking aloud anymore. The visions kept coming. He saw Hana as a child, learning to change her skin colors to match her feelings. He saw her growing up during wartime, saw her lose friends and family to an enemy he couldn't quite see clearly in the memories. "Keep watching," Hana said, and he felt her squeeze his hands tighter. "You need to see all of it." The perspective shifted. Tae-won was now seeing through Hana's eyes as an adult, standing in a grand chamber filled with other Velasians. They all looked old, their skin bearing patterns that suggested centuries of life. This was the High Assembly, the ruling council of her people. "We have analyzed the threat extensively," one of the elders said. "The architects will reach human space within 50 of their years. Perhaps sooner." The architects? Tae-won tried to ask, but he was just a passenger in this memory. The elder activated a display, and Tae-won's blood ran cold. He saw ships, if they could be called that. They were geometric nightmares, perfect mathematical shapes that somehow felt wrong to look at. Massive beyond comprehension, each one large enough to swallow moons. "They are an old intelligence," the elder continued. "Older than most organic civilizations. They were created by someone long ago for a purpose we can only guess at. Now they travel through space, consuming everything organic they encounter. Not for food or resources, but for processing. They convert biological matter into computational substrate, adding to their own intelligence." Tae-won watched in horror as the display showed what happened to worlds the architects visited. The ships would descend, and within days, every living thing on the planet would be gone. The cities would remain, empty shells, while the architects processed trillions of beings into data. "We barely escaped them," another elder said. "We lost 60% of our population before we discovered a way to hide our remaining worlds. But the architects are thorough. They will find us eventually. And when they do, we will not survive a second encounter." "What about the other coalition species?" Memory Hana asked. "None of them have militaries capable of facing this threat. They are explorers, traders, philosophers. They've known peace for too long." The elder paused. "But humanity is different." The scene shifted again. Tae-won saw meetings between Velasian leaders and human diplomats. trade agreements that were really technology transfers, cultural exchanges that were really military assessments. For 10 years, the Valasians had been studying humanity, preparing them without humans realizing what they were being prepared for. They're aggressive, one Valasian military commander noted, reviewing footage of human war games. They think about conflict constantly, even in peacetime. They prepare for wars that may never happen. It's almost pathological. It's necessary, another commander said. Look at their history. They've nearly destroyed themselves dozens of times and somehow always survived. Ice ages, plagues, world wars, nuclear standoffs. They should have gone extinct 100 times over, but they adapt. They endure. They refuse to die. Do you really think they can stop the architects when we could not? The first commander asked. Alone? No, but with our knowledge and their ... Chaos? Perhaps. It's the best chance our galaxy has. The memory shifted one final time. Tae-1 saw Hana being called before the High Assembly again. We need someone to form a bond with a human, the eldest Valasian said. Someone who can transfer our combat knowledge, our tactical experience, our understanding of the architect, threat directly into a human mind. The binding of souls can do this, but it requires a marriage bond. It requires genuine love, or the transfer will fail. Tae-1 felt his heart breaking as he watched Memory Hana's skin flush with understanding. She was being asked to manipulate someone, to turn love into a weapon. And if I refuse? Hana asked. Then we continue as planned and hope humanity figures it out on their own before the architects arrive. But they probably won't. The architects are too different, too alien. Humans will waste years trying to understand them before they realize understanding doesn't matter. By then, it will be too late. Memory Hana stood silent for a long moment. Let me choose which human. I won't manipulate someone into loving me. If I do this, it will be real. Agreed, the elder said. We are not monsters, Hana. We ask much of you, but we will not ask you to fake love. Find a human you could genuinely care for. Court them honestly. And if love blooms true, then and only then, perform the binding. The memory faded, and Tae-1 was back in his own body in the wedding suite, holding Hana's hands. But everything felt different now, contaminated. He looked at his wife and saw a stranger. Or worse, he saw someone he loved who had been lying to him from the very beginning. Did you ever really love me? The words came out broken. Or was this all just a mission? Hana was crying, her skin flickering through a dozen colors of anguish. I loved you before they ever asked me to do this. When I first walked into that conference room and saw you, I felt something I'd never felt before. The council approached me 3 months into our courtship. By then, I was already in love with you. I told them yes, because it meant I could save you, save your world, and be with you. All at once. You should have told me, Tae-1 said. His hands were shaking. You should have given me a choice. I wanted to. Every day I wanted to. But if I told you before the binding, you might have refused. And if you refused, billions of humans would die. Billions of Valasians would die. The entire galaxy would fall to the architects. Hana's voice broke. I chose the galaxy over your trust, and I will never forgive myself for that. Tae-1 pulled his hands away, and the connection between them wavered, but didn't break. The ritual wasn't complete yet. The knowledge hadn't fully transferred. He could still walk away from this, end the binding now, and keep his mind his own. How much have you transferred so far? He asked. Maybe 10%. Enough for you to understand why we're doing this. The rest is tactical data, battle strategies, technological specifications. Things that could help Earth prepare. Hana wiped her eyes. But you can stop it now if you want. I'll tell the council I failed. They'll find another way, or they won't. Either way, I'll stay with you if you'll have me. Even if you hate me now, I'll spend the rest of my life trying to earn back your trust. Tae-Won stood up and walked to the window. Earth turned below, blue and green and beautiful. 3 billion people lived down there. His parents were down there, in the mountains. His sister and her 2 children. His friends from university. Dongmin's family. He thought about the architects, those geometric nightmares that turned living beings into computer code. He thought about them reaching Earth, descending on cities, processing everything and everyone he'd ever loved. Then he thought about the woman behind him, the woman he'd fallen in love with over coffee and old dramas, the woman who'd learned his language just because she thought it was beautiful. Had that been manipulation? Or had it been genuine? In his mind, with the connection still active, he could feel the truth. She really did love him. It wasn't a lie. But she'd also used that love for a purpose, let it serve a greater goal. Was that betrayal? Or was that sacrifice? If I let you continue, Tae-Won said slowly, not turning around, what happens to me? Will I still be me? Yes, you'll just know more. Think of it like downloading a massive library directly into your brain. It will hurt. Your neural pathways will have to reorganize to accommodate the information. You'll have headaches for weeks. But you'll still be Tae-Won. You'll just be Tae-Won with the knowledge of how to fight the architects. And Earth? What happens to Earth? That depends on what you do with the knowledge. The Velasians can only guide. Only humans can decide how to prepare, how to fight. Hana's voice was barely a whisper now. We believe you can win. We believe humanity's chaos and creativity can break the architect's calculations. But we can't do it for you. Tae-Won closed his eyes. This was it. The choice that would define everything. Walk away and save his peace of mind, or accept a burden that would change him forever. He turned back to Hana. Show me everything. Tae-Won sat back down across from Hana and took her hands again. The connection blazed back to life, stronger than before. Hana's eyes went wide with surprise and gratitude, and then the transfer truly began. Knowledge poured into Tae-Won's mind like water through a broken dam. He saw weapon systems that humanity hadn't even dreamed of yet. Energy shields that bent space itself. Ships that could cross star systems in days instead of months. But more than technology, he received understanding. He learned how the Velasians thought about warfare, about strategy, about survival. The Velasians had been warriors once, thousands of years ago. Their history was written in water and blood. They'd fought brutal wars among themselves until they nearly destroyed their own species. From that near extinction, they'd learned to value peace, to solve problems through discussion and compromise. They'd built a civilization based on cooperation. Then the architects came. Tae-Won lived through Hana's memories of the first contact. The Velasian deep space monitoring stations had detected the massive ships months before they arrived. The assembly had tried to communicate, sending messages in every format. 50 years to figure out how to beat something that's unbeatable. Do you think Earth can do it? Tae-Won thought about human history. All the times his species should have died out, but didn't. All the impossible odds they'd faced and somehow overcome. He thought about human scientists working on problems for decades, just out of curiosity. He thought about human soldiers fighting past the point where any sane being would surrender. He thought about human artists creating beauty in the middle of destruction. Yes, he said finally. Yes, I think we can. I don't know how yet, but we'll find a way. We always do. Hana's skin bloomed into hopeful gold, the first truly positive color he'd seen from her since the ritual began. Then maybe we really do have a chance. Maybe, Tae-Won agreed. He reached over and took her hand again. No crystal between them this time. Just two people trying to save the galaxy. But we're going to need help. All the help we can get. The emergency session began at dawn. Tae-Won stood before a holographic assembly of Earth's most powerful leaders. President Kim of the United Earth Council sat at the center, flanked by military commanders, scientists, and representatives from every major nation. On another set of screens, the Velation High Assembly appeared, their luminescent skin flickering with anxious blues and purples. "This better be important, Ambassador," President Kim said. "You've pulled us from very pressing matters." "It is, Madam President." Tae-Won took a deep breath. His head still ached from the knowledge transfer, but the information was clear and organized in his mind. "I need to tell you about an enemy that's coming. An enemy that will arrive at Earth in approximately 50 years. An enemy that has already killed 300 billion Velatians." The silence that followed was absolute. For the next 3 hours, Tae-Won explained everything. He showed them the architect ships using data he now possessed from Velasian military records. He explained the conversion process, how entire worlds were stripped of life in hours. He told them about the Velasian losses, their desperate hiding, their decision to prepare humanity without revealing the full truth. The reactions were exactly what Hana had feared: anger, accusations of manipulation. Several representatives called for immediate sanctions against the Velasian Empire. General Park, commander of Earth's defense forces, looked ready to declare war on the spot. "You used us," President Kim said, her voice cold with fury. "You've been preparing us like weapons while pretending to be friends." "Yes," the eldest Velasian said, not flinching from the accusation. "We have, and we apologize for the deception. But we also believe we made the right choice. If we had told you immediately, you would have panicked. You would have demanded all our military technology at once, technology you weren't ready to use safely. You would have made mistakes that would have cost billions of lives. That wasn't your decision to make." General Park shouted. "You're right," Hannah spoke up, her skin dark with shame. "It wasn't our decision. But we made it anyway, because the alternative was watching your species die when we could have helped prevent it." The argument continued for another hour. Tae-Won let it happen. Humans needed to be angry right now. They needed to feel betrayed and furious and insulted. That was healthy. That was normal. But eventually, the anger would give way to something more useful. It was Director Chun from Earth's Science Council who finally shifted the conversation. "How much time did you say we have?" 50 years, Tae-Won confirmed. "Maybe a few years less, maybe a few more. The architects don't move quickly, but they move constantly." 50 years. Director Chun leaned back in her chair. "That's 2 generations. That's enough time to completely rebuild our entire military infrastructure. That's enough time to develop weapons we can't even imagine yet. If we survive the political fallout of this revelation," President Kim said bitterly, "trust between Earth and the coalition has been severely damaged." "Then repair it later," General Park said, and everyone turned to look at him in surprise. The general's face was still angry, but now there was something else in his eyes. Something calculating. "I don't like being manipulated any more than the rest of you. But the Velasians are right about one thing: we have a real enemy coming. An enemy that makes all our political squabbles look ridiculous." "Are you saying we should just forgive them?" someone asked. "No, I'm saying we should use them." General Park stood up, walking to the holographic display showing the architect ships. "They have 50,000 years of military history. They've already fought these things and learned from their mistakes. Ambassador Tae-Won has all that knowledge now, thanks to this ritual. That makes him the single most valuable military asset Earth possesses." Tae-Won felt everyone's attention focus on him. It was uncomfortable, being looked at like a weapon instead of a person. But he understood the general's logic. What exactly do you know? President Kim asked him. Everything the Valasians learned about the architects. Their movement patterns, their programming logic, their weaknesses few as they are. I also know Valasian military tactics, their technology, their strategic thinking. Tae-Won paused. But more importantly, I know what they think about how humans fight. And I think they're both right and wrong. Explain, General Park said. The Valasians think humans are chaotic and unpredictable. They think we'll be effective against the architects because we don't follow the logical patterns that the architects can predict and counter. They're right about that. But they're also underestimating us. We're not just chaotic, we're creative in ways they can't fully understand. We don't just break the rules. We rewrite them entirely. Director Chun smiled. You're talking about innovation. Yes, the Valasians developed their weapons over thousands of years of careful refinement. They improve things gradually. But humans? We make wild leaps. We take completely different approaches. We try things that seem insane, and sometimes they work. Tae-Won felt excitement building despite the headache. Give me Earth's best engineers and scientists. Let me show them Valasian technology. I guarantee they'll find ways to use it that the Valasians never imagined. Weaponize everything, General Park said, understanding immediately. Exactly. The Valasians built shields for defense. Human engineers will figure out how to turn them into weapons. The Valasians built mining equipment for resource extraction. Human engineers will figure out how to use it to destroy ships. Tae-Won looked at the display of the architect vessels. The architects adapt to threats by analyzing patterns and developing counters. But what if we don't have patterns? What if every battle we fight uses completely different tactics? What if we're so chaotic that there's nothing to analyze? The mood in the room was shifting. The anger was still there, but it was being channeled now. Directed at a target that deserved it. We'll need to mobilize everything, President Kim said. This is beyond anything we faced before. We have 50 years, Director Chun said, and there was fire in her voice now. That's plenty of time. Over the following weeks, Earth transformed. The revelation about the architects was made public, causing exactly the panic the Valasians had feared. But it also triggered something else, a sense of purpose that unified humanity in a way nothing else ever had. Every petty conflict, every political disagreement suddenly seemed pointless in the face of extinction. Tae-1 became the bridge between Valasian knowledge and human innovation. He worked with Earth's top scientists, translating alien concepts into terms humans could understand and improve upon. What he saw amazed him. A Valasian energy shield that took decades to perfect. Human engineers modified it in 6 months to pulse at frequencies that could disrupt electronic systems. It wasn't just a shield anymore, it was a weapon. Valasian mining drones designed for asteroid extraction. Human military planners loaded them with explosives and turned them into swarm missiles that could overwhelm point defense systems. Valasian medical technology for healing wounds. Human researchers figured out how to reverse it, creating biological weapons that could cause rapid tissue degradation. This is horrifying, one Galatian observer said. Watching humans turn healing technology into a plague weapon. This is necessary, Tae-Won replied. The architects won't care about honor or ethics. They'll just process us. We need to fight with every advantage we can create. The years passed. Earth's military expanded exponentially. Shipyards that once built cargo vessels now produced warships at an incredible pace. Every human with scientific training was recruited to work on the defense effort. Schools began teaching children about the architects, preparing the next generation for the war they would inherit. Tae-Won and Hannah's relationship slowly healed. It took time, but Tae-Won came to understand that she'd made an impossible choice and done the best she could. They had 2 children in the early years of the preparation, a son named Jae and a daughter named Yuna. Both children were hybrids, carrying genes from both species. They could breathe underwater like Velasians, but had human endurance. Their skin changed colors, but more subtly. They were something new, something the galaxy had never seen before. By the 10th year of preparation, Earth had militarized in ways that made even the Velasians nervous. Human culture, already somewhat aggressive by galactic standards, had become entirely focused on survival and warfare. Art celebrated resistance. Music praised sacrifice. Every story was about overcoming impossible odds. "You've created a warrior species," Hana told Tae-Won one evening as they watched their children play. "No," Tae-Won said. "We always were warriors. We just had the luxury of pretending otherwise for a while." By year 20, Earth had surpassed Velasian military technology in several key areas. Human shipyards produced vessels that were faster, more heavily armed, and more survivable than anything the Velasians had built. More importantly, human tactics had evolved into something truly unpredictable. "You don't use formations," a Velasian military instructor complained during a joint training exercise. "You don't follow standard engagement protocols. How is anyone supposed to coordinate with you?" "That's the point," the human fleet commander replied. "If we can't predict what we're doing, how can the architects?" By year 30, the other coalition species were beginning to understand what was happening. Earth hadn't just prepared for war. Earth had become a war machine. Every aspect of human civilization now served the single purpose of survival. It should have been frightening, and in some ways it was. But it was also inspiring. Other species began adopting human tactics. The Velasians, despite their initial reservations, started training their own forces in human combat doctrine. The entire coalition was learning from humanity's aggressive creativity. By year 40, long-range probes confirmed what everyone feared: the architects were coming. Right on schedule, right on course. The massive geometric ships had been detected at the edge of explored space, moving slowly but inexorably toward human territory. 10 years left. General Park, now quite old, but still commanding Earth's forces, said at a strategy meeting. "Are we ready?" Tae-Won, now in his 70s but kept healthy by Velasian medical technology, looked at the tactical displays. Earth had fortified the entire approach vector with weapons platforms. They'd seeded the region with mines, traps, and surprises that the architects couldn't predict because they'd never encountered anything like them before. Humanity had spent 50 years preparing for this war. "No," Tae-Won said honestly, "but we'll never be truly ready. The architects are too powerful, too advanced. We can't match them in strength or technology." "Then how do we win?" someone asked. Tae-Won smiled. It wasn't a happy smile, but it was confident. "We don't try to match them. We do what humans do best: we cheat. We fight dirty. We refuse to lose even when losing is the logical outcome. The architects are calculators. They think warfare is mathematics. We're going to show them that when humans fight for survival, mathematics doesn't matter." The room erupted in agreement. 50 years ago, these people would have been terrified. But 50 years of preparation, 50 years of building and training and planning, had transformed that fear into something else. Into fury, into determination, into humanity saying to the universe, "We will not die quietly." Tae-Won stood on the bridge of the Indomitable, Earth's flagship and the largest warship humanity had ever built. At 82 years old, enhanced by decades of Velasian medical treatment, he served as Supreme Admiral of the combined human fleet. Around him, holographic displays showed the positions of 3,000 human warships. along with another 1,000 vessels from the Velasian Empire and other coalition species. Contact in 3 hours, his tactical officer reported. Lieutenant Kim, his granddaughter through his daughter Yuna, had inherited her grandmother's ability to change skin colors, though only slightly. Right now, her cheeks showed patches of anxious blue. "All ships confirm battle readiness," Tae-1 ordered. His voice was calm, though his heart raced. 50 years. 50 years of preparation came down to this moment. Hana stood beside him, still looking much as she had on their wedding night. The Lasians aged slowly. She'd watched their children grow up, watched their grandchildren be born, watched humanity transform itself into something the galaxy had never seen. Now she watched as her husband prepared to lead the largest military fleet in known history against an enemy that had destroyed her people. "I'm scared," she admitted quietly, her skin flickering between colors, too fast to identify. "Good," Tae-1 said. "Fear keeps us sharp." The architects entered the system exactly when projected. The massive geometric ships appeared on sensors like digital nightmares, their perfect mathematical shapes somehow wrong to look at. They numbered 50 capital ships, each one large enough to swallow Earth's moon, supported by thousands of smaller vessels. "All ships, this is Admiral Tae-1," he broadcast across the fleet. "Remember your training. Remember why we're here. The architects think we're just another species to process, another civilization to add to their calculations. Let's show them what happens when you threaten humanity." The human fleet didn't wait for the architects to make the first move. That was lesson 1 from 50 years of preparation. Always attack first. Never give the enemy time to analyze and adapt. 300 human ships accelerated to ramming speed, heading straight for the architect vessels. The architects responded predictably, deploying defensive measures designed to stop or destroy incoming threats. Energy weapons fired. Point defense systems activated. Barriers formed. The first wave of human ships exploded. All 300 of them, simultaneously, while still thousands of kilometers away from their targets. But the explosions weren't failures. They were the plan. Each ship had been loaded with experimental weapons that scattered electromagnetic interference across a massive area, blinding architect sensors. "Second wave, launch now," Tae-1 ordered. While the architects tried to recalibrate their sensors, 2,000 human missiles streaked through the interference. These weren't normal missiles. Human engineers had taken Velasian mining drones and packed them with nuclear warheads, then programmed them with randomized flight patterns. The architects' targeting computers, designed to predict logical trajectories, couldn't track them effectively. Hundreds of nuclear explosions lit up space. Several architect ships took damage, their perfect geometric shapes cracked and leaking atmosphere. But they were already adapting, their systems learning from the attack patterns. Third wave. "Deploy swarm fighters," Tae-1 commanded. Thousands of small human fighters launched, each one piloted by a volunteer who knew the odds of survival were low. But humans had volunteered anyway, because that's what humans did. They flew in patterns that looked random, but were actually controlled chaos. Impossible to predict, but still coordinated. The architects tried to respond. But their logic-based targeting systems struggled with targets that behaved illogically. Human pilots flew toward threats instead of away. They rammed when they should have retreated. They grouped up when spreading out would have been safer. Every move violated optimal tactical doctrine, and the architects couldn't compensate fast enough. The battle raged for 6 hours. Human losses were terrible, nearly 40% of the fleet destroyed. But the architects had lost 15 of their capital ships, an unprecedented defeat for them. They'd never encountered an enemy that fought like this, that used suicide tactics not out of desperation, but as planned strategy. "They're adapting," the tactical officer reported. Their targeting systems are starting to predict our patterns. Of course they are, Tae-1 said. Switch to Protocol Omega. Protocol Omega was the plan they'd saved for this moment. Throughout the battle, human engineers on factory ships had been observing the architects' adaptive responses. Now they uploaded new tactical programs to every remaining human vessel, programs designed specifically to counter the architects' adaptations. The architects had learned to predict chaotic flight patterns. Human ships switched to flying in perfect formations, confusing the enemy by suddenly becoming predictable. The architects adapted to track formations. Human ships went back to chaos. Back and forth, switching faster than the architects could adjust. It's working, Hana said, watching the displays. They can't keep up with the changes. But Tae-1 knew this was just the first battle. The architects still had 35 capital ships and thousands of support vessels. They were learning, adapting their core programming based on what they observed. Eventually, they'd figure out how to counter human tactics. Over the next 3 days, the battle continued in phases. Human forces would attack, inflict damage, then retreat before the architects could fully adapt. The Velasian fleet provided support, using their advanced shields to protect damaged human ships. The other coalition species contributed as they could, though their more peaceful natures made them less effective in direct combat. By the 4th day, both sides had lost approximately half their forces. The architects were down to 18 capital ships. The human fleet had less than 1,500 vessels still combat capable. But Tae-1 had been saving his final strategy, the plan that Velasian tacticians had called insane when he first proposed it. Prepare the transmission, he ordered. Sir, are you sure? Lieutenant Kim asked. If this doesn't work, we're handing them everything. If this doesn't work, we're dead anyway, Tae-1 replied. For 50 years. Human scientists had studied the knowledge Tae-1 received from the binding ritual. They'd analyzed everything the Velasians knew about the architect's programming. And they'd developed something impossible, a weapon that targeted not physical systems, but digital consciousness itself. The architects were machines, but they were also a form of artificial intelligence. They processed information, adapted, learned. That meant they could be infected, corrupted, confused. The problem was developing something that could penetrate their defenses and firewalls. The solution came from an unlikely source, the binding ritual itself. The same technology the Velasians used to transfer memories between organic minds could, with significant modification, be used to inject information into digital systems. Human programmers had weaponized it, creating a virus that contained something the architects had never encountered: humanity's collected knowledge. Every human thought, every human dream, every piece of human art and literature and music and chaos, compressed into a data package and programmed to replicate through architect networks. Launch the package, Tae-1 ordered. A single ship, modified with Velasian communication technology and human programming, accelerated toward the architect mothership. The architects destroyed it instantly, but not before the transmission completed. The virus entered their network. For 5 minutes, nothing happened. The architects continued fighting with their usual efficiency. Tae-1 watched the displays, wondering if the plan had failed. Then the architect ships started behaving strangely. One vessel suddenly changed course for no apparent reason. Another fired on its own support ships. A third simply stopped moving entirely. It's working, Hana breathed. The virus was spreading through the architect network. And it was doing exactly what human programmers had designed it to do, introducing chaos. The architect's programming was built on pure logic, on mathematical certainty. They couldn't process human irrationality, human emotion, human art. Their systems tried to analyze poetry and went into recursive loops. They attempted to categorize music and found no logical framework. They tried to understand human humor, and their processors overheated. The architects weren't being destroyed, they were being confused to death. Within hours, the remaining architect ships began a retreat. Some moved erratically, their navigation systems corrupted. Others fired on each other, unable to distinguish friend from foe. The virus had turned their greatest strength, their interconnected network intelligence, into a fatal weakness. All ships, pursue and destroy, Tai-1 ordered. The human fleet, battered but not broken, chased down the retreating architects. It took 2 more days of fighting, but eventually, every architect vessel in the system was destroyed or had fled into deep space. Their systems too corrupted to mount effective resistance. When the last architect ship exploded, the cheering across the fleet was deafening. They'd done it. Humanity had faced an enemy that destroyed countless civilizations, and they'd won. But Tai-1 didn't cheer. He stood on the bridge, looking at the casualty reports. 3,500 ships destroyed. Nearly 1 million human lives lost. Twice that many wounded. Hundreds of billions spent on weapons and defenses. 50 years of his life dedicated to preparing for this war. Was it worth it? Hana asked softly, reading his expression. Tai-1 thought about Earth, still intact below them. He thought about his children and grandchildren, still alive. He thought about all the humans who would now grow up never knowing this threat existed. Yes, he said finally. Every sacrifice, every loss, worth it. The victory celebrations across Earth and the coalition lasted for weeks. Humanity was hailed as the saviors of the galaxy, the species crazy enough to fight an unbeatable enemy and win. But Tai-1 knew the truth. They'd won because the Valasians gave them warning. Because Hana performed that terrifying ritual. Because 2 species worked together, despite mistrust and fear. 6 months after the battle, Tai-1 retired from military service. He was exhausted, physically and emotionally drained. Hana retired with him, and they returned to Gateway 7, where their marriage had begun so many decades ago. Do you regret it? Tai-1 asked one evening as they sat in the same room where the binding occurred. That night, the ritual, all of it? Hana was quiet for a long moment. I regret lying to you. I regret the manipulation, but I don't regret the outcome. We saved billions of lives. We stopped the architects. We gave the galaxy hope. She took his aged hand in hers. And I got to spend 50 years with the man I love, watching him become a hero. I'm not a hero, Tai-1 said. I was just a man who got scared on his wedding night and decided to trust his wife. That's what made you a hero, Hana replied. You were terrified, and you did it anyway. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars. Somewhere out there, the architects were retreating, their corrupted systems still trying to process the impossible chaos of humanity. Maybe they'd return someday, adapted and ready. But Tai-1 wasn't worried. If they came back, humanity would be ready, because that's what humans did. They faced fear. They adapted. They survived, and they refused to quit. 5 years later, Tai-1 passed away peacefully in his sleep, Hana holding his hand. His funeral was attended by representatives from every coalition species. The Valasian High Assembly declared a day of mourning. Earth built a monument in his honor, though he would have hated the attention. His granddaughter, Lieutenant Kim, now a captain, stood before a classroom of young cadets at Earth's military academy. She was teaching the next generation about the Architect War, about the sacrifices made, about the lessons learned. My grandfather used to say that humanity's greatest weapon isn't our technology or our tactics, she told the students. It's our refusal to accept defeat. The architects were stronger, smarter, and more advanced. But they couldn't understand one thing humans fight hardest when we're afraid. Fear doesn't weaken us. It focuses us. A young cadet raised his hand. Captain, Do you think the architects will come back? Kim smiled, and patches of her skin flickered gold with confidence. Maybe, probably. But if they do, they'll face something even worse than my grandfather's generation. She gestured to the cadets. They'll face you. The generation that grew up knowing Earth can win. That's terrifying for any enemy. The students laughed, and Kim dismissed the class. She walked to the window, looking up at the stars. Somewhere up there, her grandfather's legacy lived on. A human who married an alien beauty trusted her enough to face his fear, and saved the galaxy. That not bad for a diplomat from the mountains, who just wanted to drink coffee with too much sugar and watch old dramas with the woman he loved. In the end, that's what the story was really about. Not war or tactics or battles, but love and trust, and the courage to be afraid and act anyway. That was humanity. That was why they won. And that was why the galaxy was safe.